back to Book by Jenna. This is our January wrap up. So this is every book that I read in the first month of the year. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a lot. I was in a book slump. I feel like this always happens to me. I don't know if it's because I read so much over the holidays when I'm off of work, but then like going into January, I just did not have momentum. And I picked up a lot of books and read the first few chapters and like nothing was sticking, nothing was like really hitting. I did not get to read that many books this month, but the books I did read, I'm excited to talk about. I also feel like January took forever. I'm excited to be in February. I feel like I just need a fresh month, and now all of a sudden I am in like a reading mood, so I feel like we're gonna read a lot of really good books in February, but let's talk about the books that I read in January. The first book that I read in January was One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. Now this is the second book that I have read by her. The first book I read was Alone with You in the Ether, which is quite different than this book. I didn't love Alone with You in the Ether. I found her writing very beautiful. She's very lyrical, very highbrow, very poetic in her writing style. So if you're into that, you'll definitely enjoy her writing style. But I was excited to go into this one. This is essentially like an urban fantasy. So it takes place in modern day Manhattan, and it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but with witches. So it's two rival witch families. And obviously, as you know, Romeo and Juliet, there's like, you know, the children of the opposing families and their relationship. So it's a really interesting concept. But again, I just did not feel connected to these characters. The storyline felt very just even to me. Again, I do agree her writing is beautiful, it always is, but I just wasn't super attached to these characters. I rated this book a 3-star. It's a solid book. I would recommend it if you like Romeo and Juliet retellings, if you like urban fantasies. But yeah, solid 3 for this one. I'm really excited to talk about these next 3 books, and I say 3 because it's a trilogy, and that is the Cruel Prince series. I feel like I was the last person to read these, and they are young adult fantasy novels, so I feel like a lot of people read these books when they were in the high school, and I never read them. I really enjoyed my time. I feel like these are polarizing books. People love them, they love the Cruel Prince trilogy, or they are not a fan. I was a fan, which is always so exciting. Like, I'm always apprehensive to go into books that people love or hate. I feel like that kind of skews my personal opinion of them, but I really enjoyed these. The first book in the series is The Cruel Prince. The Tale is a Paid Actor. The series is by Holly Black. I don't think I said that. This book was probably my least favorite out of the 3, but it was a little bit slow in the beginning. I feel like there was some buildup that in hindsight was good for the plot, but it was a little bit slow to get through. This basically follows 2 twin sisters, and the main twin is Jude. They get taken from the mortal world into the fairy realm, and that is where they live out the rest of their lives. So it's these humans trying to navigate the fairy world, and because of Jude's standing and who she lives with and her family ties in the fairy realm, she comes in contact a lot with the prince, and his name is Carden. So it's following a lot of Jude and Carden. Now this is an enemies to lovers, heavy on the enemies. And I think that's why this book gets such a bad rap, is because people are going into this book, especially the first one, wanting a quick enemies to lovers arc, and they want lots of romance and all of that, and you're not gonna get that. Like, this is the truest form of enemies to lovers that I've seen played out in a series, to where the characters are true enemies and they don't just like instantaneously like each other. It's a slow burn. And I like that. It seems more realistic to me. So I gave this one a 4-star. Kind of went in between a 3.5 to a 4-star, but I think in totality the series is so great that this one got bumped up to a 4-star for me. But I also listened to a portion of this on audiobook, and it was very good as audiobook as well. So after finishing The Cruel Prince, I immediately went into the sequel. So that is The Wicked King. I listened to this a little bit on audiobook as well. I think it's really great on audiobook personally. I'm not a huge fan of fantasy books on audio, but I liked this one. If you like your fantasies to have a lot of like politics and strategy, these books are like a game of chess. Like it's like moves and counter moves. It's so great. The romance is a subplot, and I enjoyed it. I find that refreshing. Sometimes when the romance is such the forefront of a fantasy book, it takes away from the stakes, if that makes sense. Like we've all kind of read those romantasy books where the world is like at an end, or there's, you know, the enemy is approaching, but why are we spending so much time talking about the love interest and like the romance? Like it has its proper place in the overall plot, but the romance is not the only plot. And amazing, amazing plot twists in this book. Like this book is really good. So I gave this one a 4.5 stars. And then we go into the final book of the trilogy, which is The Queen of Nothing. I also really enjoyed this one. I do feel a little bit, if you've read this book, I feel like there was a weird like fourth quarter plot twist that happened in here that I was kind of confused about. But overall, I felt like it was fine to the larger part of the story. And talk about a strong female character. I feel like Jude in these books is so strong and so independent, and I'm like, she walked so that new fantasy female main characters could run. I rated this one like between a 4 and 4.5 star. I guess I'd go 4.5 for this. I was giggling, kicking my feet. She's a 4.5. I just made that decision because I was giggling, kicking my feet at this one. Overall, I am a Cruel Prince girly, and I'm like happy to say that. And naturally, I'm now like down the rabbit hole of TikTok edits. Like, oh my gosh, the TikTok edits really get me on this one. So overall, so happy that I read this in January. I needed a palate cleanser after reading the Cruel Prince trilogy. So the next book that I read was Beautiful Beast by Neva Altaj. I liked this book. This was a good one. This is a mafia romance. I was in the mood for a mafia romance, and I feel like when you have that itch, you gotta scratch it. So this book follows a girl who is really good at computers. She's kind of a computer hacker, and she is the daughter of a Chicago mob boss, and she ends up getting kidnapped and flown to Sicily, where another crime boss lives, and he kind of holds her captive, and we know that whole story. Not glamorizing being held captive, but as we know, that is like usually a core plot of these mafia romance books. But talk about being down bad for her. Like, he is down bad. There is so much pining in this book, so much tension, so much angst, and the plot is really good. So I was really pleasantly surprised. I think this is part of like 20 freaking books in this like universe, because like it follows plot lines and storylines of like the one crime family and then the other crime family. So it's like, I was looking it up because I wanted more. I was eating it up. I wanted more from Neva Altaj, and there's like 20 books in this universe. So if you want to go down a mafia romance rabbit hole, you absolutely could. But I got what I needed from this book. I rated it a solid 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend it if you're into mafia romance. And then at the very end of the month, I read one final book. I listened to this one on audiobook actually, and that is What Have You Done by Shari LaPena. I have read so many of her books. She's a really good thriller author in my opinion. She does what Frida McFadden used to do for me, which is I want a quick page turner. I want to be on the edge of my seat. I want to binge it in 2 days, 3 days. That's what Frida McFadden used to do for me. She really doesn't do that anymore, but I can pretty much always depend on Shari LaPena to give that to me. The books don't rate like 5 stars, but they'll be like a solid 4-star book for me. This one felt a little bit flat in the ending, so I gave this book a 3.5 star. Basically, it follows the story of a sleepy town in Vermont, and this girl, Diana, who is beloved by everybody in the community, winds up dead. And so, of course, they're trying to figure out who murdered her. This one is kind of unique in that Diana does get a point of view as a ghost. It doesn't add too much to the story, but I thought that that was kind of unique. I don't really see that a lot in mystery books. I feel like where this book lost me a little bit is we could have had way more plot twists. I guessed at the very beginning like who did it, and I was ultimately right. I was still very entertained throughout. So if you're looking for a quick page turner, I would recommend her books. But this wouldn't be like the first book that I recommend. I actually have a lot of other books that I love from her. I think, what's the one that I love? An Unwanted Guest. I love that book. It's about a group of people that are like snowed in at a cabin and there's a murder. I always recommend that book because that one really got me. So if you're looking to get into Shari LaPenna, definitely give this one a chance, but I would highly recommend starting with An Unwanted Guest. Okay, and that's it, everybody. I did not read a lot this month, as I said, but the books that I did read, I was entertained. I feel like I had a good genre mix, but excited to see what February brings. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.